Hi everyone, welcome to today's coffee chat. So feel free to grab that coffee or you're having lunch with us. Hey, welcome and thanks for joining in. So today we will be actually talking with Michelle from Her Duit. So just as a super quick intro, so Her Duit is a podcast on personal finance, business, and career that's dedicated to women. And I'm Steve, the founder of MyPF. So today we'll be having a chat really on is there really a gender divide in personal finances? So we'll be covering a wide range of topics, including emergency savings, investing, fintech, holistic wellness, and more. So yeah, let's have a great conversation. If you have questions, comments, hi
Hi,
Michelle.
hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle, and as Steve has mentioned, I'm the host for the Her Duit podcast, a personal finance theme podcast with a women focus, and then also the person behind Her Duit, the personal finance. I guess you can call it a page.
All right. And you guys just had your 100-day full moon achievement, right? For Her
Yes,
Duit?
yes. It's been 100 days. Started my first episode on the 28th, I think, of October, and then it's been 100 days since non-stop producing content as well as doing the podcast on a weekly basis.
All right, that's totally awesome, and congrats again. And as a fellow content creator as well, I was really pretty impressed to see that out the 100 days, you all didn't miss a single day. That 100 days of really consistent content. So yeah, total props and kudos for that, Michelle.
Thank you.
All right, so all those watching in, yeah, go ahead and give us a like, say hi, share with us what you're having for lunch, and hit that share button. So today's coffee chat can just reach more people definitely, and we appreciate it so much. Yeah, yeah, I'll buy you a cup of coffee. All right, all
Yeah,
right.
that sounds nice.
Sure. So, yeah, maybe Michelle, beyond what I've said, yeah, you can just give us a super quick, intro of yourself. That'd be totally awesome.
Sure thing. So as you guys know already from my page on my podcast, if you follow me, Her Duit, that is what I do at night on weekends as well as at night on weekdays and on weekends if my boss is listening to this. But during the daytime on weekdays, I work full time. I am a head of marketing for a tech business. So that's what I do during the day, which I guess kind of contributes to the kind of content that I'm creating creatively on the Her Duit channel.
All right, and I truly trust that the personal finance scene in Malaysia, and even around the world, is just that little bit better with Michelle and Her Duit being in existence. Really. All right,
You.
so we're gonna ask you just a few quick fire questions, so everyone gets to know you a little bit better, Michelle. And yeah, so some of you who are new to Michelle, just 100 days old. I mean the podcast, not her, obviously. But yeah, so Michelle, what made you come up with the Her Duit podcast in the first place?
That's a great question. I've always been a big consumer of podcasts, but a consumer of podcasts in the US primarily. So I listen to a range of topics. I think personal finance is one, but news as well as just general holistic development things, self-development as well as relationship advice and work stuff. Then I'm also a big consumer of like personal finance related content. So I thought that in Malaysia, there's not really a very themed podcasts, or not a lot of them as compared to the US, right? Like a lot of Malaysian podcast content is very like a table talk or like a coffee chat kind of thing where they talk about any topic around the world or anything that's happening.
Whatever's hot,
So,
right? Yeah.
yeah. So wherever that is interesting, they just talk about it with a bunch of people. So I thought it can be pretty interesting to start one that is audio focused. I think there's a lot of YouTube, so like video focused personal finance content already in Malaysia. I think that's fantastic. But I thought podcast is interesting because it's long form. So compared to a video, which typically has to be 10 minutes or 10 plus minutes for you to capture someone's attention, a podcast can be an hour and it can be a lot more in depth in terms of the content. So that's why I started a podcast. I've always been a big women empowerment person. So I thought, why not combine the concept of women as well as personal finance as a podcast, which probably I think is the first in Malaysia. So that's why I thought, okay, why not?
You should put that out there, really, as your headlines, right?
With so many filtering. First, personal finance and women Malaysian podcasts.
Oh, personal finance for women. First personal finance for women. Anyway, we can brainstorm that a little bit as well. And just thanks for sharing that. And so as you've been 100 days with podcasting, how has actually podcasting helped you to grow personally?
I think that's a great question. I think from the technical perspective of podcasting, personal finance aside first, learning how to edit an audio, and I think interviewing someone for an hour, like via video, because now it's MCO and COVID season, I have not met any of my interviewees in person, actually. All of
I
them
haven't met you in person either.
yeah, correct. So everything has been done virtually. So I think the balance of like the technicalities of running a recording and then editing it after and getting that distributed on time, but at the same time learning how to interact with someone virtually that you've never ever met before, and making them feel comfortable to share information about themselves that is commonly a taboo subject. I think that has definitely been like big learnings for me.
Definitely a lot of barriers, and which you think I think you're just breaking through those while having fun along
Yes,
the way as well. Yeah.
lots
So
of fun
speaking
for
of
me.
fun, yeah, what's one fun fact about you that most people don't know?
I used to be a spin instructor. So
Wow.
I think 2-3 years ago, I started teaching spin classes. So if you don't know what spin classes are, it's rhythmic cycling on a stationary bike in an enclosed room. So you follow an instructor and you kind of ride a bicycle, stationary bicycle to the beat. So I was teaching spin for 2 years, and then I
Wow.
stopped teaching last year because of COVID. And I think having to balance the whole like work and doing virtual classes at home kind of thing wasn't really
Not
for me.
easy. Mm.
Yeah. So I thought like, you know what, I'll just take a break. And at the same time, actually, second fun fact is that I broke my wrist last year, right before COVID, when I went to Japan, had too much fun. I broke my wrist when I was snowboarding. So I
Oh,
actually
sorry to hear
took
that.
a break. No worries. It taught me a lot of things actually, but one of the things that I had to do was stop teaching spin and then go into yoga. So that's a third thing. Extra fun facts about myself.
Wow, 3-in-1 fun facts, and I really felt that as well. I broke my foot actually last year as well. Yeah, so spent a quite number of few months. I broke it in the gym while working out. So
Too much fun. Too much fun.
too much fun as well. But I think we're all yeah. So now instead we get Michelle spinning her stories actually on personal
Yes.
finance. So that's even more awesome. Definitely. So Michelle, what's your favorite quote?
Ooh, I just shared one today on the Her Duit channel. What is it already? Let me look for it.
Sure,
But I
sure.
think there's so many fantastic women related quotes. But I think one of the primary ones for personal finance for me is the best time to start was 20 years ago. If you didn't start then the best time to start is now. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like a
Buffett.
lot
Yeah.
of quotes, in relation to like financial freedom and like women empowerment. So yeah, they all speak to me. I think everyone can relate to the quotes from a different perspective, and that's what's great about quotes, right? That you can see how it relates to you, and then you can try to work on it from your own perspective.
Definitely. And I think quotes. There's a right quote, an app quote for different stages, different points in your life as well. Yeah, yeah. And
Definitely.
for all of you, Michelle totally doesn't know all these questions that I've been asking
Yeah,
her, so it's totally
not prepared.
impromptu. Which was on purpose, if I may add. So we get that element of being so real
Candidness.
and now
Yes,
and candidness, totally. And now, Michelle, I'm going to ask you a totally random question. Yeah.
sure.
So we basically have a random question generator that generates some 20,000 random questions, and I don't even know the
Wow,
question is, and I'm going to put it up right now, and let's see what
nice.
your random question is. Michelle, would you rather look like an iguana or a rhinoceros?
Ooh, wow, great question. An
Yeah.
iguana or rhinoceros? I actually
Yeah.
would pick the rhinoceros.
Okay.
I think for me, I probably look quite kind, and I feel like maybe sometimes that is taken advantage of by people, or people think that they can
Really?
bully me. Right? I don't know, maybe. So rhinoceros to me looks scarier. Like looks like you're in charge.
Tough.
With like so I would like to look like a rhinoceros actually. Like
I
an
don't
iguana,
think
it
you.
still looks kind.
Mm,
Although like
okay.
daily.
A bit
But
goofy.
kind. Yeah. So right nostril.
All right, and thanks for explaining that. Yeah, I totally don't think you look like a rhino, Michelle, but yeah, I don't think people want to mess with you either, to be honest. All right, so we're gonna jump right into our questions for today, and the main bulk of it. If you're just tuning in, go ahead and hit that like and share button. Go ahead and leave some questions and comments, for either or both of us, and we'll pick that up right at the end at the Q&A session. All right. So today we will be both taking turns to just really talk about personal finance, to actually have a conversation. So Michelle is obviously representing herself, and maybe a little bit about the audience that she represents as well. And likewise, I'm representing myself as well, and a little bit of the tone of the readers, and the kind of feel that we have with our content creation. Yeah. So a shout out as well to all the web team and MyPF. Yeah, this is kind of all you guys in here as well. All right. So we have 7 different topics actually. So we're going to just take turns really on each one of this. And yeah, Michelle, you got to choose, who will actually go first actually, and then we can proceed from there. You want to go first, or would you rather
I'll
that I
probably
go?
always choose you first.
All right, sure. Let's do that then. All right. So jumping in the very first topic, I'm going to flash it on screen as well, so we can actually go along as well. So the question goes for both of us. I'll share first, and then Michelle will go next. So our very first topic is very generally, what are your thoughts, on personal finances? Where are we as we look at personal finances today, or what comes to mind when we just talk about personal finances? So to me, personal finances is something that's, hence its name, personal finances. It's both the personal side as well as the finances side, and you really need both aspects of it. You can't just have focusing all on the finance side without really focusing on the individual, on the personal side of things. I think in Malaysia, especially over the last 1 year plus, there's really been a lot of growth, a lot of interest actually in personal finance, which I think is really good. A lot more information out there, a lot more things that are accessible to everyone. With that being said, it's also a couple of things that about how that personal finance content needs to be one simple, that people can actually understand it. It's no point telling something that's way too over everyone's head and no one totally gets it at all. And also the other part will be really checking the content on the information that's out there, because just because someone puts information out there, doesn't mean necessarily it's 100% right or correct as well. And especially because it's general, it's not personalized for you. So to kind of look out for those caveats as well. And one final bit before I end up speaking too much or dominating the discussion, is that in personal finances, I know a lot of times, there's a lot of interest on the investing side of things. Investing is sexy and all that, but investing isn't the only thing. So you really need to be looking at everything, from your cash flow to your risk management to your estate planning, what happens if you pass away, your tax planning, debt management if you're carrying that together with investments. So it needs to be holistic and all in all, right? Michelle, your thoughts on personal finances?
Wow, I feel like the next parts I have to go first because you covered everything.
We'll take turns.
Spot on exactly what you said. I'm a big believer that the reason why personal finance is called personal is because it is not so much personal to you and what you spend, for example, and what you particularly invest in, but also what your own goals are in life and what your definition of all these financial freedom and financial empowerment, and even down to like retirement, what that means to you. So for very different people, personal finance can one person, it can mean I have the freedom to do anything I want. So maybe I want to retire early, I want to travel across the world as a single person. Another person can be I want to start a family. I think there's one person that I follow based in the US. She wants to achieve FIRE because she wants to be a stay-at-home mom, and she wants to be a single stay-at-home mom. So I think that is also a very interesting concept on like why personal finance is personal. And the next one can be you want to support your family, and that's a personal reason as well. And that's why I feel that ultimately personal finances is very personal because of that. And probably we are in a situation to tell other people whether their goals are right or wrong, or judge other people for what their goals are. I think the next part is on that touches on that as well, is on the different categories as what Steve has mentioned. So personal finance, I think the most interesting and most exciting part is probably investing, because there's so many things that you can do in investing, and then it's things that can change drastically, right, from a day-to-day basis, but things that are really just down to you, like from budgeting, like where your money is derived from, as well as how you spend. It's pretty much just you being in control of those parts of your life mostly. So, but it's very important to place rather equal emphasis on all the different categories, from like saving to spending to even looking at debt and investing, I feel. So I think that those definitely spot on what Steve has mentioned. So not just investing when we talk about personal finances. I think when we share content, we want to also give equal amounts of attention to all the different parts of personal finance.
That's so true as well. Although it can be a struggle as well. I mean, even Michelle and myself, I'm sure we have our own biases and expertise, interest areas, and we'll be delving into investment planning a little bit as one of the upcoming questions as well. But over to the next question, and then Michelle's gonna start first with this. So the next one is on emergency savings. So what are your thoughts, Michelle, on emergency savings? And I'm sure this is a topic that's very close to your heart.
Yes, definitely. I think one of the things that I've also shared this as a post on the Her Duit page, and probably an upcoming episode on the podcast as well, on emergency savings. But I think for me, if I want to start on a very more anecdotal like perspective, when
stories, we love stories.
When I didn't know anything about investing, and when I just started working, and even before I started working, when I was about to step into the workforce, one of the things that my mom told me was, make sure you have 6 months saved. She didn't use the word emergency funds or emergency savings, but she just said, make sure you have 6 months of your expenses saved. Like that is your
primary. Make sure you have 6 months.
So make sure you have that before you start looking at anything else. So you should prioritize that first. Then I think across time, then I realized more and more people will use the terminology emergency funds or emergency savings. But I think there is probably a bit more debate in terms of how much money you should save for your emergency funds. So I mean, personally, I have 6 months worth of expenses. But I think in the industry, people save anywhere between 3 to 12 months. I've briefly mentioned it on the post as well, but I think it's really down to, like, that's why it's also part of personal finance. What are the components of your life that would require you to dip into your emergency saving? So for example, if you own a house, or if you live yourself and you don't live with other people or your parents, then you may need a bit more emergency savings for when there is a real rainy day, like rainy storm, big rainy day, and then like your roof will leak, and for instance, those kind of things, and you need to pay money for maintenance. If you have a car, for example, then you probably also need to think about what are the potential things that you have to spend on emergency for your car. Speaking to MJ late last year, she mentioned how she had to spend like 10,000.
For those tuning in, MJ is the
value investor mom.
Behind Value Investor Mom. So we'll check her out as well if you haven't.
So
all right, go ahead, Michelle.
How she had to spend like 10,000 ringgit to fix her car engine, and that was literally right before MCO. And with MCO kicking in, she didn't even need to use her car, so she actually spent that amount of money from her emergency savings for that, where she was actually keeping it for her sabbatical when she was looking after her newborn. So I think emergency funds, for me, 6 months, that's also because I don't have a lot of dependencies. I don't have to look after my parents, nor do I have any dependencies to look after. I live at home with my family, so I don't really have to look after that as well. I just have my own car that I probably have to salvage if anything ever happens to it. So that's my take on emergency savings.
All right, thanks for sharing that, Michelle. And you mentioned about it being raining and all that. That's why some people call it rainy day fund. So different people have different terms for that. Your backup fund, mojo fund, sinking fund, whatever that you want to call it. And so 6 months is the one that you hear most often. Although a lot of people actually, as they went through COVID actually this year, and they've seen pay cuts, job losses, they kind of realize, hey, 6 months may not actually be sufficient. Actually, maybe 12 months or even higher than that may be sufficient. And probably on the extreme scales of both ends, 3 months, as Michelle also mentioned, that's probably the absolute minimum. Even you have like all gung-ho for investing, that 3 months is really needed in case you're not forced to kind of force sell your investments, especially if it's at a loss, realizing those paper losses. So that's why the backup is for. Or on the other extreme, if you're a retiree or going to be retired, similarly as well, you want to be holding a little bit more cash savings. Just to make sure that your funds are sufficient, where you're looking at maybe 3 to 5 years worth of it really in your emergency savings. And now let's go on to everyone's favorite topic, which is also on investment planning. And as we go into that as well, one of the things that we want to explore a little bit as well, and maybe starting from this, is also between women and men. Do they also view the topic differently as well on things such as investment um, planning? I think I'm supposed to go first, but Michelle,
Yes.
if you want to go first, you can as well. No?
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead. You are the licensed one here.
All right, sure. All right, so as Michelle mentioned, my full-time job is actually as a licensed financial planner. But of course, again, whatever we're sharing today is not investment advice. It's more of a chat, conversation over coffee, or if you're having lunch. We're so glad that you're here with us. So for those just tuning in, we're here with Michelle from Her Duit, and we're actually having a conversation on various other topics that affects us as Malaysians, and also exploring a little bit about is there gender differences as we look into these topics as well. All right. So on investment planning, I think really as we look into it, generally men are a little bit more aggressive, I feel, in terms of jumping into investments. Maybe I kind of suspect that might be actually a mix of nurture really. That means how men are, or since they're young, they're usually a bit more encouraged to kind of just go there and take action, or maybe it might be as bold as to say that parents, oh boy, okay lah, go and do lah, fall down, never mind, it's okay, just go ahead and do it. So that kind of carries along, I feel. Or maybe that I think actually overall women actually make better investors. Actually, they do more research, they analyze a bit more detail, they're less prone to making major financial mistakes, and better at saving and investing in general than men. While men, they'll just go in, they feel all hyped up, etc., and they just go all out in. But with that being said, I think when there's actually information and actually financial literacy, financial education going about, and that's for both genders, I find that balance actually starts to reduce. Actually, that means both men and women then actually make investments, and we're not talking about gambling or trading, talking about investments per se. That means we're talking about probably mid to long term, 3-5 years duration, or to infinity, as some people's favorite length of investment will be, basically forever, and just kind of enjoying that passive returns and investments. So I find that gap actually narrowing. So it's really not so much, I feel, about the approaches. And again, different couples are different as well. I have come across many couples as well, where actually the wife actually is much more aggressive than the husband, and so it can actually be in reverse as well. So really, if key things about investing is, to me, will be a few things. One is to just improve your financial literacy and knowledge. Secondly, will be to really know about all the different asset classes out there. What are your investment options? What are the pros and cons for each? And really invest looking at the long-term time frame. An analogy as well would be, Buffett, which Michelle quoted earlier as well. So, for example, if you look at Buffett and his story, he started investing really, really young age. If you have read some of his biographies, or even like the book Snowball that was written about him by a journalist, it actually talks about how from young, he's very entrepreneurial, delivering newspapers, installing what do you call that? Pinball machines, and then splitting that money with the owners of the establishment. But if you really look at it, and Buffett is at one point was the richest man in the world. Today is still one of the richest people in the world, despite pledging so much to philanthropy, giving away. Is that the bulk of his wealth actually really only occurred in the later part of his life, even though he started really young. And this just speaks about how important compounding is really as the eighth wonder of the world. So no matter your age, no matter your gender, start early, avoid making major financial mistakes, and let time and compounding work its magic along the way. All right, over to you, Michelle.
Thanks. That was very comprehensive, and I wanted to reiterate the part where you mentioned right at the end that it's so important to start early. I think one of the things that I probably can speak for myself as well is that when we look at financial literacy and knowledge and education, it's not so much the lack, right, of information. I think there is an abundance of information, and everyone wants to share more about what they know as well as what they've read or what they have been able to research. But it's probably more on the when do I take that step? So it's a bit more on the behavioral side, like what is stopping one from taking that step in investing. And if we look at gender differences, then as you've mentioned, and you've probably spoken to a lot of people because that is your job, that men are a bit more aggressive when it comes to, if I don't know anything yet, I would still go in. But then for women, perhaps the approach has always been, I need to know everything. I need to know everything before I start investing. And this is something that is also talked a lot by Sally Krawcheck, who is the CEO of Elvest, a women-based like finance wealth management platform in the US. So you said that women always want to know everything first. But the thing is, we don't ever, like, when do we ever know everything about something? Like today,
when is that line really?
the line is infinity, it goes nowhere, right? And today we use a lot of tools and we don't know everything about it. I was speaking to Scarlett, who leads the marketing and partnerships for Luno, a crypto exchange.
Yeah, she I was just chatting with her actually this week, and she mentioned that, hey, she just talked to you really. So I was like, hey, I'm doing a podcast with her. I'm wondering if she's listening in today or catching the replay later. Hi, Scarlett.
Say hi, but I'm going to quote something you said. So one of the things that she mentioned before is that we all use email as a tool, but then, like, how much do we know about email in terms of the technology behind it? And we're likening that to the whole cryptocurrency craze. Like, how much do you need to know about cryptocurrency and the blockchain technology before you are confident to invest into that asset class, for example? So I think probably information is there. It's a step to take to learn all the information, but it's also another thing to feel comfortable and feel confident enough to start investing. So I think that's one portion. But in terms of why I think like women invest less is probably, like, I was reading a lot of information and I'm able to summarize that into two major parts. One comes down to the gender pay gap, and I think that's talked a lot already around the world. The other thing is also that women are known as the primary caregivers, right, of their family. So when there's a child or there is a family member or elderly member, women are usually more expected to look after the family members or their dependencies when anything happens, like whether there's a newborn or like your parents are getting older or your parents are sick. Women are more like, usually they are the ones who have
societal expectations.
Yeah, correct. So, and that's why, with that said, women will have to take a break. More often, women have to take a break from their careers as compared to men. And what that means is that there's a gap. There's a gap in your employment. And what that means is that you don't necessarily have an active income. It would be great. I think a lot of companies today probably pay women for maternity, and in more welfare states, they pay for more things. But generally across the world, I think there is
very few have paternity though in Malaysia right now.
Oh yes, paternity leave is something that's so understated here and definitely has to be championed. But that aside, in terms of like, there is definitely an employment gap, and that is not only just like your active income reduces, right? Because at that point of life, when you do enter back employment at a later stage, that means you're probably already older and you forgo the compounding, exactly like what you said, the compounding from whatever income you
have missed a certain number of years,
and
right?
That's probably pretty still a younger time when the compounding effects are bigger, right, compared to when you're older. And even with that, like when you have a gap in your employment history, typically companies would also then pay you less. It's not equivalent to someone who has the exact same credentials as you but has remained in the workforce.
Why this year they did not work? What happened here? Okay. Right, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I think those are some of the reasons, like the primary caregiver and then following up from the gap in employment history, I feel contributes to why then women invest less. I think it's not so much of an active, I invest less, but because they have less money, so they cannot take that much risk. But from what I read also, in terms of some surveys and statistics that has been carried out, is that women who have the money actually invest more than men. Just that because there are less women with more money, so then ultimately when you kind of average that down, right, then it will be less in general.
Right. And those are interesting points, Michelle. I really liked how you talked about, it being really about also related to the pay and the income that they're getting. And yeah, I would actually believe so as well, that as I just kind of reflected back on some of my clients that I work with, couples and all that, really it is oftentimes the wife or the female actually that takes that first step, that putting their whole household's finances right in order, and then only bringing in the man along the way as well. So yeah, really really awesome insight and input there as well. Yeah. But of course, I think compared to like countries like Japan, where it's even worse. I think where kind of like if you're married, there's kind of the expectation for you to step away from the workforce and really just fully dedicate your whole life into caring for your baby. Yeah. But there's a lot more that definitely Malaysia and Malaysians can do as well. So if you're an employer listening to this, yeah, this is really something for you to be looking into and considering looking ahead.
Absolutely. Right. Not just like the pay gap for women, also paternity for men. Definitely.
All right. Yeah. Definitely. I just had a newborn as well. So yeah, I can probably also relate to that as well. All right. Moving on to the next one is, Michelle, what are your thoughts about financial technology?
But from which perspective particularly?
It's really open. It's a coffee chat. So whatever you feel like taking the direction of this chat to, really, Michelle.
Okay, sure thing. I think one fun fact again about me, I worked at a venture capital as my first job after uni. And then our primary focus in terms of companies that we invest in is in the areas of fintech. And I was also part of the initial team for the first e-wallet in Malaysia. You can Google that. I'm not going to tell you what it is. So I think fintech, like to me, I work in tech. So I'm familiar with the products as well as the innovations in the industry. I think what fintech has been able to provide everyone is the democratization of investing, right? So I think let's talk about Stashaway, for example, as a robo-advisor. I think the asset classes or the investments that Stashaway make is in primarily US ETFs. And as a normal, like a regular Joe, let's say like 10 years ago, if I was interested in investing in US ETFs, for example, the challenge or the journey for me to get there is probably a lot more like up and down and very
easy.
roads. Yeah. But today is so easy that you don't even have to think about it every month because you can automate those payments. And I think that is what technology has helped us. I think that is from the investing side, but even on the spending side, right? Looking at payment gateways, for example, I think last time when you used to have to buy things, you have to do the whole, give me your bank account number, give me your name, and then you have to transfer money to a person and then send them a receipt. But today,
or buy a scratch card and then scratch it away and make payments. Gosh.
I remember that. Yeah, but today, because of they are also a type of fintech, just fintech has a spectrum, right? So the robo advisors are probably at the top of the spectrum, but even payment gateways, a way for you to easily make payments using your credit cards or even like FPX, has really helped us be able to bring in a lot more conveniences in our lives. So I'm all like 100% for fintech. That's my take.
Right. And that's totally cool as well. I might jump in a little bit as well, or rather get you to jump in a little bit as well. How about, is there a difference in fintech adoption between males and females?
Ooh, actually, I don't really think there's a huge difference because, as I mentioned, fintech, there's a spectrum, right? So even if you look at e-wallets are technically also a fintech product.
Yeah.
There's a lot, like generally everyone, I think the gender percentage differences is probably similar. Probably have to ask Stashaway what their percentage is in terms of like male and female. But I think it depends on which part of the spectrum you're on in terms of products. But I think generally across the board, I would like to believe that it's pretty equal.
All right, awesome. Thanks for putting that in as well. Yeah, I don't think Stashaway releases its stats publicly. Even the USD 1 billion which they recently hit, there was also because they've actually reached that amount that they actually came out to say that. But I kind of have an inkling, and not just talking about robo-advisories, but investing in general. I would think that women similarly, we're talking about robo-advisories and other investment platforms, maybe a bit slower in adopting, but once they are in, I think in talking about proportion of the percentage of funds that they have that they invest, I think would actually be higher than men actually. So that's the feeling that
interesting.
I'll be getting as well. Similarly, tech is something close to me as well. My bachelor's was actually in IT.
Cool.
So my major was actually in programming actually, but then it
Mm-hmm.
was a total switch of fields, and then I hit it in the business, and then on the financial services side of things. I really like the democratization that we're seeing with financial technology in the picture. Michelle has mentioned there's just such a wide spectrum, isn't it? And there's so much more as well. Even things that P2P lending, equity crowdfunding. The blockchain behind that. Automatic processing of financial documents, even the law and legal tech side of it, that's very linked to finance as well. So that's all part of the picture of the finance ecosystem. And thinking about things like digital banking, challenger banks. Hey, we're just getting started as well. There's been some
Correct.
exciting developments,
Yeah.
announcements from Bank Negara side as well. And we're seeing more of this coming in, whether it's those stodgy old traditional banks kind of just switching things up a little bit, even like Frank by OCBC. What we're
Yes.
having Frank by OCBC Malaysia is just a small spectrum. In Singapore, you see, it's a lot
Correct.
more advanced. The
Yeah.
options that they have.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
so there's a lot of exciting things happening. In terms of, I think, fintech, it's definitely here to stay. Key things will be its lowest cost, because you're leveraging on technology and the advantages of tech, where basically it takes away the human on the manual side of it, where things that computers, etc., excel in. And I think we're next really heading into towards will be things like the usage of data, big data, analytics, how that's really applicable to our lives as well. Even interesting things. For example, I'm not sure if you use the May app from Maybank to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even that, to some people, it's really fun because you don't have to track, every single expense as long as you did something that's tied to your Maybank account. Right there, you get a kind of like a screenshot or a summary of basically all your spending by categories, etc. And there's so much development ongoing actually. So I think fintech is really just gonna pervade our lives really. So if I may throw in a wrench, it will be probably on the other side where for many people, what's the first thing that you do when you get up, is to actually reach for your phone. Yeah, after opening your eyes, reach for your phone,
Yeah.
and then you are there, spending just so much time on your phone, whether it's directly or indirectly related to financial technology or some way and form. So on the hindsight, also will be, how do you actually manage as well, or the many different apps as well. I have clients who actually come to me and they're kind of experiencing basically what you may call as actually lethargy or basically tiredness of having way too many apps. Oh, this investment of this app, this other
Mm.
things on another app. Can't you have one app that kind of puts everything together rather than
Yeah.
having all these apps? So yeah, that's one
Absolutely.
thing to look at. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another interesting thing I note as well, and not so much on gender, but age really. That actually the older people, you think that they might be a bit slow in adopting, but no, hey, they really really love the shiny apps really, and for them that's like really really wow, and they really love using those apps,
Yeah.
especially those who are 50 and above. If talks of gender, to be fair, the question I asked Michelle, I don't think there's very much difference in terms of the adoption as well. All right, before we hit the next question, and so we can catch our breaths as well, we have a little bit of a segue. So for those that are just joining in, here we are with Michelle from the Her Duit podcast. We're having an awesome chat. We're about halfway through. If you have questions, comments, do drop them below. We'll put them up right at the end of the session as well. And so why take a sip of coffee? Yeah, how do you think the coffee chat has been going so far, Michelle?
I am really enjoying it so far, and I hope that people who are listening in, they learn something from the chat as well. I think that's so important. Democratizing conversations around money. I think, as we've mentioned a lot of times, money is such a taboo subject. People don't really talk about it, especially you and your close friends. Like, when do you bring up the subject of money, right? You hanging out in a mama and suddenly like, hey, how, like, you should stash away. So I think that's not
They'll
very
be like
common.
thinking, you want to sell me unit trust or insurance, is it? Huh? Suddenly talk about this sort of
Exactly.
thing.
And I hope that, like, with us talking about things like that, it opens up more conversation. And even personally, I feel like after I've started Her Duit and started just talking about money like this openly on air publicly, I get a lot more people like my friends existingly to come and talk to me about money. And obviously previously they've never had the opportunity to do so.
Wow.
So I think that has been fantastic, whether it's from the perspective of, oh, what is your experience, or even from the perspective of like, I just want to have some confidence through your experience, for example. I think those are important.
Yeah, and you don't have to be, an influencer. You don't have to be a micro influencer with 10,000 or even a nano influencer with 1,000 followers. Hey, you just be you really, and have that conversations. Talk about your experience, what you're going through, and whether you know it or not, you are actually influencing the people around you, and hopefully for the better as well. And you can have fun like Michelle is having. I'm sure conversations are more spicy and interesting nowadays as well.
Correct. I think one of the things that if anyone listening out there, what you can do is you can share this video with a friend who probably you've never spoken to about personal finance or any money topics. And that can be a perfect segue for you to start talking to them about personal finance. You can be like, found this very interesting video. Very interesting, the things they're talking about. Maybe we can talk about this one day too.
That's a great line actually. Your friends, your spouse or your fiance, etc. Just start having that conversation about money. It isn't hard, it's actually simple, but neither is it easy. Really, there needs to be a belief that that this is something you're investing your time and your resources in. Whether you're listening to this podcast, which we're so grateful that you're here with us for this coffee chat. Having more conversations again. All right, and with that, let's head into the next bits of our conversation with Michelle from Her Duit as we continue to explore these topics. All right, so the next few questions, and these are just our final three, are a little bit less, what should I put it, direct, or maybe more soft in nature, if that's the right word for that. You can let me know if that's the right word. So the next one that we're going to be talking about is on self-development and how it relates to finances. I can't recall. Is it my turn to go first or is it yours?
I actually can't remember too.
Okay. All right. In that case, why don't you go first?
Sure thing. I think self-development is such a wide topic. Like coming from me, like I mean the channels that I look for or that I develop myself in, I think similar to everyone else, depending on what your choice of media is, can be books. Some people really like to read and they absorb the most by reading. I really like podcasts because I live very far, so my commutes to anywhere is very far. So when I'm driving, I like to listen to podcasts that I don't have to look at the video, right? That's not safe at all. Please do not watch videos when you are in the car. Some people prefer videos, like the short, like 10, 12 minutes YouTube videos that they can see at home. So I think those are all like fantastic channels for self-development. I think in terms of if we want to really draw it down to like a gender topic, I think in terms of self-development, one of the major things, I think a big women figure around the world is Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. She's the one who started the Lean In movement, right? And that's actually how I got into knowing a lot more about the statistics behind women. All this while I've just been living as like normal, like everything is normal to me. I don't really know much about the differences and all the biases and stereotypes. But I think one major thing that she talks about is something called imposter syndrome. And I think a lot of women, if you don't know this term in particular, it's
not related to the video game, right? The imposters the video game. Not totally no, right? Okay, just to clarify that.
Among us, right? But imposter syndrome is feeling that you do not belong somewhere. So it can be from any perspective. So for example, at work, if you've been recently promoted, for example, women feel this more often than men, imposter syndrome. So you will feel that, do I deserve to be here? Like, am I better than people who are working with me? Why did they promote me instead of
like questioning yourself?
Correct. And I think this is something that Suraya, ringgit.com, she also talks a lot about. I think she recently had a talk about, she gave a talk about Bitcoin, and she publicly talked about how she was also experiencing imposter syndrome because who is she to give a talk about Bitcoin? And she's a big figure in the personal finance community and scene in Malaysia. But she also always feels a bit like, I'm also not a licensed financial planner, for example. Like, who am I?
She's doing her CFP now.
Correct.
So,
doing her CFP now.
So this credentials
year,
a little bit.
This year's journey that will add up to her credentials. And I don't know if that will help with imposter syndrome, but that's huge. I think drawing in from a story from Sheryl Sandberg's book Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg actually was admitted to Harvard. I think with her brother, I read the book many years ago, so may get some facts wrong, but generally she was admitted with her brother. And I think when she was in, she always felt like, was I admitted to Harvard by accident? Like, am I here because I'm a woman? But then her brother always felt like, like I'm great, and that's why I'm here. And when she was going for exam, I think she thought
So
that like,
different, right? The
yeah,
reactions.
correct. And she thought that this is the worst exam ever. Like, I'm gonna be so bad. Like, I'm gonna do so badly. I'm gonna fail, and Harvard's gonna know that I'm an imposter and gonna kick me out. And her brother just felt like, no, it was great. Like, that exam went well. And when the results came out, I think she did better than her brother. So I think that's where like the whole reasoning behind imposter syndrome comes in, and I feel like that contributes to like self-development. Perhaps the things that women look to more would be to understanding how they can combat imposter syndrome, as versus men who are probably developing in many other areas that men would struggle in. So that's my contribution on this topic.
All right, thanks for sharing that, Michelle. And yeah, really something to delve a little bit into as well, imposter syndrome. And oftentimes I feel that sometimes it's that we're kind of too used to the status quo, kind of too used to how things are, that we don't really realize any of this actually happening. Whether it's some form of imbalance or even persecution, actually, until sometimes someone tells you, or you actually go and travel, actually, which is one of the reasons I love travel, and you see around the world, and then you realize that, hey, this feels totally different or off from what's here in Malaysia. And or when you start sharing stories, like in the States and all that, I was sharing a little bit of what happens in Malaysia, and giving an additional different insight or input sometimes just really helps to opens one's eyes as well. So self-development in that sense can come from many ways and form. Michelle mentioned a number of them, of course. Like podcasts that are awesome, like Her Duit, which everyone should definitely go and
Thank
listen
you.
and follow to as well. Don't forget the MyPF podcast as well, and videos. But those are not the only things. Besides formal ways of actually self-development, there's a lot of informal ways of self-development that are available out there as well. There are a lot of different courses, programs, and a lot of them are free, even or very minimally or very affordably priced, where you can actually just really work on the things that you actually want to develop and grow forth. But all of this doesn't get anywhere if you really don't have an end game or a direction in mind. As in the book Alice the Cat, when the Cheshire cat and Alice met, and Alice actually asked the Cheshire cat, who was grinning widely there, and so Alice asked, "Oh, which way do I go from here, Mr. Cat?" And then the Cheshire cat asked Alice back, "Oh, where do you want to go?" And Alice replied, "Oh, I don't know where I'm going." Then guess what the Cheshire cat replied? "Then it doesn't matter whichever way you're going if you don't know where you're actually heading to, isn't it?" And that's really true in our lives as well. We really need to know what's our end goal, what's our direction, what is it that gets you out of your bed every morning and drives you actually. Life is meant to be not just about a mundane, everyday grind, really, but really it's actually about not even money even. It's really about what's the value that you get out of it, whether that's your money, your time, and other resources that you have, and God has given you, no matter how long you span of life, that may be 70 and 10, plus minus whatever. But then really, how do you actually use these resources, like your money, your finances, investments, and so on and so forth, for both yourself and your loved ones, really. Yeah. And that self-development bit will be basically helping you in order to really kind of just maximize your resources, use the things that you have, and actually freeing up more time, so you can actually spend more time with your loved ones. You probably heard as well, ask someone who is actually on the dying bed, and they're not going to tell you, "Oh, I regret the 500,000 that I didn't make." Yeah, the biggest regret for most people is they didn't spend enough time with the people that they loved, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
All right, with that, we'll move on to our final two questions. The next one is on holistic wellness. Yeah, And to be honest, this is not something that I know very in depth on, so I'm just going to speak like for less than a minute, and then have Michelle do most of the
Sure.
talking on this
Sure.
area. I would just want to say that wellness comes in various ways and forms as well. So kind of flows from what we're talking about self development. So we're talking about holistic wellness. You need to be looking at things like financial wellness, of course. And we're advocates for that. Definitely, there's physical wellness. That's really important. Spiritual wellness, mental wellness. That's really important as well. And all these different wellness areas. I think there are like 6 or 7 of them, and they all really interlinked actually. If your physical health, for example, is having issues, or your mental health, you're not in the good mental state, you're not seeking help or a counselor, or having conversations with people to especially like if you're in a hole, it's very hard to dig yourself out, really. So by really having that complete wellness spectrum is really important when it all comes together as well. And linking back to earlier topic about things like fintech as well. So just a shout out as well. So for example, Naluri, which is a digital wellness app, there's a way actually that you can get access to counselors, coaches working together in a team that can really help on your holistic wellness. And there are a lot of others out there as well. I talked also with founder of Walnut Wellness. There's another wellness digital app as well. So those are 2 of the ones that are around. And there's a lot of other different options, whether using fintech or not. But really, we need to be looking at wellness as a whole, really, and not in silo or isolation. All right, over to you, Michelle.
I really like that. I think when you spoke about all the different parts of wellness, like suddenly there's a round shape that comes into my mind. And I guess you mentioned 4, but let's say if there are 5 factors, then it's like a pentagon, right? And you can't really be superior at one and then sacrifice the other. As you mentioned, I think it has to be a balance, and it shouldn't be I want to sacrifice my physical wellness for the sake of growing my financial side of things. I think it's more important to have a balance of all the things within holistic wellness than to be superior in one area. So, but with that said, I think when you mentioned this topic to me, I was also thinking, like which perspective of holistic wellness should I speak about? I think one of the things that came up to my mind is on the mental health side of things. I think society, as we progress, I think we've probably put more emphasis on mental health already compared to before. I think people know more about like physical health as well as financial.
Even some insurance actually now covers some mental health related coverage, so that's really good as well.
Yeah, so I think in terms of that, if we want to talk about something that is a bit more gender related, then I will talk a bit more about men. And I think if we look generally across the board, the world, the suicide rates of men is significantly higher than women. I was looking at some statistics in the UK this morning, and it's
I didn't know that actually. Okay, interesting.
3 times more men.
Wow.
Suicide rates are 3 times more than women. Doesn't necessarily mean that they experience depression differently. I think experiencing depression is probably percentage-wise similar across the board. But because of this terminology, I'm not sure if you know about it, but I heard about it through a podcast. It's called toxic masculinity. So it's the fact that we talk about...
My wife's a licensed counselor, so yeah, I've come across that term.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I was listening to this podcast and they talk about how when men were growing up, they were always told that they have to be the strong one and they have to be the one carrying their families and being the providers, and they cannot be fragile and they cannot cry, for example. And that is what toxic masculinity...
There's dust in my eyes.
Yeah, so I think that is the reason that contributes to this significantly higher suicide rates across the world. And I think it's really, really important to talk about that. While we tell women to like be strong when they are kids, like the whole gender stereotype thing, at the same time we also have to teach men and little boys how to speak about their feelings and show their emotions instead of hiding it all in. I think like let's talk about even
the strength actually in that actually talking about emotions.
And I think we don't talk about it enough. It's always thought of to be a weakness instead of a strength, but it's actually a lot more strength to be able to talk about your vulnerabilities and where you need help than to hide it. So that's where I see a bit of difference in terms of like a bit of divide in terms of holistic wellness, more on the mental wellness side, and that we should definitely step up and help men that way.
Right. Yeah, and thanks for bringing up those inputs. Definitely. All right, and here we are into our very final question. for this afternoon coffee chat, which actually is kind of a relaunch of our coffee chat. So hopefully we're going to do a little bit more of this regularly as well. And maybe we'll get Michelle in, or maybe a panel of people at some future
Sure.
session as well. And our very final question is, your thoughts on kindness.
This is such a broad topic as well. But I think kindness, I was reading this book last week. I just finished reading this book last week. It's by Jay Shetty, one of my favorite podcasters, I guess, in the world. It's called Think Like a Monk, but it's about like kindness and finding your purpose in life. And it talks about 4 spectrums of kindness. And I think where I want to get to from this is that I think kindness is something that everyone needs to have. Like being compassionate, being kind to people around you, not so much to expect something in return. I think that's where the 4 spectrums of kindness come in. I think when you are kind to someone and expect something in return, it's probably like level 3 of where like
is it? I was going to call it hypocrisy, but sure, level 3, okay.
And I think the other one is giving kindness, but somehow like expecting it to one day come back to you as good karma. That's actually level 2. Of kindness. Level 1 kindness is just giving, like giving with no expectations of receiving anything in
no
return.
strings attached.
Yeah, so that is level 1 of kindness. I think obviously it's very hard. It's very hard for us to move towards being kind to every single person, especially to people who probably have hurt
you.
Yeah, I think that's particularly hard. It's easy to be kind to people who are very nice to you, right? So I think it's a journey. It's a journey to work towards being kind. I think sometimes you probably have to make a decision whether kindness can be stepping away, like from someone who has hurt you and someone who is toxic to your life. That's probably something you have to step away from, not for you to decide whether I want to be kind and continue interacting with this person. But I think male or female, gender, regardless of that, like everyone needs to work on like being kinder to the world. I think that's something that we definitely need today, especially when we're living in this pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. And the world definitely needs a little bit more kindness, and definitely for all of us to try to be a little bit kinder, to try a little bit better, for your fellow man, even those people who annoy you or just get on your nerves for whatever reason. And Michelle mentioned online as well. And sometimes being online, of course, is great. You get connected. We can have coffee chat sessions and this and other podcasts, whether video, audio, etc. Tech is such an enabler. But at the same time, because you actually don't have that face-to-face interaction, sometimes it emboldens people to go on a little bit more, or for various reasons, whether to try to get attention, or to basically voice their views because they feel that, hey, you're hundreds of kilometers away, and what I say actually has no bearing or impact. I can just let loose of whatever that I want to say as well. But really is to know that all these conversations that we're having, whether it's on personal finance or investing or any other topic, that we are actually talking to real human beings, real human people, regardless of gender, whether male or female. We're all at the core of it. We're all human beings. We're all creations of God. And kindness is really important. Even, for example, in Facebook groups, actually, you'll notice that the group rules in a lot of Facebook groups actually have one of the lines is to be kind to one another. But what is actually practiced in these groups, that remains up for debate, whether there's really kindness or there's some toxicity that's going along the way as well. Yeah. So I think that no matter where you are, whether you are someone that or maybe even if you're especially someone that's been held in high regard by others, or you're an influencer, or you're creating content, know that your voice echoes out a little bit more, because there are people who actually trust and believe what you say, because you've built up your own brand, or your own equity, your own voice after a period of time as well. So you have to be careful, I think, with actually what you say and how you say it. That's really important as well, especially if you're just seeing words. You can actually interpret it in very varied or different ways, really. So I would suggest err on the side of caution, clarify, maybe have a private conversation with that person if you're not sure what person actually means or is coming along. But ultimately, I think recognizing we all have our own bias, we are all have our own different backgrounds, our own baggage, even society's expectations, etc., so on. And so forth. But yeah, with a little kindness, I think that would really go a very long way in
Absolutely, I definitely have to agree with you there. I think it's more often it's easy to be reactive than for us to respond to people before thinking. I think what's really important here, if you're someone who is reactive, I think there's nothing uh like you can't immediately change your behavior to not be reactive, right? So the thing to do is probably like take a step back. Like let's say in an heated argument as well, whether in person or virtually, like if you're someone who is more reactive than someone who responds, take a step back, take a break, 10 seconds. If you need an hour a day before you can respond rationally, then take that time first, because when you react to things, you may accidentally hurt someone else's feelings by accident, and that may not have been your intentions, right? So it's always
Mm-hmm.
important to be able to be sound and calm first before
To
you make.
whether you're reacting or you're responding, and there's a
I
clear
think that's
difference
so
between
important.
that.
Like from many perspectives, whether it's like a virtual thing, virtual even harder because then you don't see the person, so you never know. But even like to family, to friends, and even at work, it's
Mm.
easy for us to be reactive, and it's really important to be more responsive than reactive.
And especially sometimes the ones that are closest to us that kind of bear the brunt of it because we just
Correct,
have no
correct.
filters and just let loose.
Exactly.
Really, yeah. All right, we have some questions from some folks, so we'll be bringing all those and chatting on those as well. I know we've gone past the 1 hour mark. Time just flew by really,
Yeah.
really fast. Really, thanks for everyone who's been streaming and watching in. So yeah, we're heading into the Q&A part, and you still have questions. I know we're over an hour, but yeah, just drop those questions. We'll try to pick up
Yes.
those as well. All right. I'll just pick the last question that just came in, and this
Mm,
is from Daniel E, because it's tied to the question or what we were just talking
yeah.
about kindness. How about the phrase "cruel to be kind"? Yeah, cruel to be kind. Does that apply in general for situations where it needs another approach?
Well, Danielle, that is like a very general question in terms of like cruel to be kind, like cruel from what perspective? I think if like from my understanding, I'm sorry if I didn't get your question right. One of the things I mentioned just now when it came to kindness was on toxicity. So if you realize that someone that their presence is going to cause you more harm, and it's cruel for you to keep them in your lives,
Mm,
instead of like trying to continuously approach this person and being kind in your interactions, if that is where you're coming from, then it's more important, I think, to value your own like mental health and to remove that so that you're also kind to yourself. I hope
yeah.
that is the question. I'm not too sure, but maybe you have a different perspective, Steve.
Mm. Well, being kind to self, yeah, that's an important part as well, definitely. But if we're talking about it from in relation to other people, whether sometimes you need to be like brutally honest, or actually
Like
bring things
tough
that are
love, is it?
tough love, yeah, or being direct to a person. And really, I think sometimes that is necessary, yeah. All relationships, you don't really see it, but it's kind of like there's that can't think of better words. I'm going to just say it, like a love barometer. How much your relationship level is at, and the things you say and do will increase or decrease actually the relationship or the strength of your bond and all that as well. And if you're actually at a point where you actually have already built up some love equity over time and invested into that relationship, I think it's more important that you actually be direct actually, even though it may affect the relationship a little bit in the short term, but it's good overall for the long term, really, of the relationship. With that being said, it's tied to kindness again. That's let's say whatever that you actually want to tell someone, yeah, like for example, oh no, this person, I'm just a totally random example here. This person actually has a little bit of BO, body odor, yeah, and that's actually affecting both your interactions with him, you don't or her, that you don't want to be around him or her because of that. So how do you actually say that? You go up to the person and say, hey, you stink, why don't you do something about it? That's maybe a little bit too blunt actually. So there's a lot of ways, whether it's very being subtle, if the person can get subtle hints, giving the person a bottle of perfume or something as a
Mm.
gift next, or gently just sitting down and just talking to that person. Being direct doesn't mean you have to be cruel about it, so they don't necessarily have to go together, cruelty as well as kindness.
Yeah, I feel like this can be like a whole episode of its own. Like,
Definitely. All right, we have two questions in the queue, and this was asked by John. I usually call him KS. He's been around, so yeah, it's a big fan as well, I believe.
Great.
And this he asked this early on as well. Do you prefer DIY investing or to use an intermediary?
Ooh, what would you mean by intermediary in
I
this
think
case?
intermediary, knowing John's background, would be like using an agent or a platform, or just through someone else versus doing it on your own.
I think using a platform can be a bit inevitable because a person is a platform and a brokerage is also a platform. So, regardless, I think you will still need an intermediary. But I think maybe from the perspective of someone handling what should be you as your perspective or your opinion. So, for example, I guess if you want to go back to the example of stash away, then that would not be DIY investing because you technically have no say towards what they invest in. Your
Right.
only say is like what is your risk profile, what's your time horizon, for example.
Yeah.
I
And how
think
much money you put in.
exactly. So I think if you're asking me, personally, I use a mix of both. I am a champion of more passive form of investing because I think not everyone is out there wanting to like learn about personal finance and investing like every day, and they're excited to do it every weekend. Like I spend hours of my life
Stocks
like
technical analysis,
like
Bollinger,
everyone. I think when
RSI,
you
MACD.
surround yourself with the personal finance community, you feel like everyone's like that, but actually this is just like a point zero something percent of the world of people who are
With a
very
loud voice though.
yeah. It's a very loud voice, but it's a small percentage of people who have like great interest and want to spend their time, and this is part of like passion and interest. So I am a champion of like passive investing. So with that said, then I am a fan of using some form of an intermediary for that purpose, especially for the purpose of diversification. But I also have what people call a fun pool of money for DIY investing because, for example, if I'm particularly interested in a sector or a company, especially in the
Tesla.
yeah, for example, that Tesla, then that I think it's more fun when you're able to DIY invest. I think ultimately boils down to you. But for me, if you're asking me, then majoritarily passive, and then like some fun money for like buying companies that I'm interested in.
Right. I would believe that, yeah, John will be asking more of you because we have had some chats over this. But for the benefit of everyone else, I'm going to just chime in with my little bit
Sure.
as well. Yeah. So I actually started investing in my teens actually, early teens. I was actually below 18, so I was actually investing under my dad's account as a joint account because I
Nice.
was under legal age. I started with unit trust way back. This was more than 2 decades ago. And then after that, I started investing into Bursa shares, US shares, and today is probably easier to ask me what I don't invest in because I'm kind of invested into a lot of different asset classes and choices, both by interest. Investing is one of the topics that I love, and one of my, and also on a professional basis, is what I do as well. I truly believe in having skin in the game. So if I'm going to be talking about it, I also need to be also aware and have my own money basically where my mouth is.
Absolutely.
In other words, yeah. So for me, it's also blend as well. So yeah, for most people, the answer is probably somewhere in between of both. Like Michelle mentioned, just that little bit of fun. In other words, to scratch an itch, or whenever there's something of high conviction that you want to put a little bit in, or maybe a certain theme, etc. And go ahead and do that. Yeah, whether that's 5-10%. Again, it's not investment advice, but it's talking about general rules of thumb. And
Yeah.
yeah. Other than that, yeah, for most people, you may not have either the interest or the time or the expertise, to be if you're ordering, for example, 100% into direct stocks. Then when having a little bit of a passive investment approach can really help as well. And without delving into like details like asset allocation, etc. That's actually I feel more important because asset allocation actually counts about 40% of your returns. Sometimes people say 90%. There's a little bit of a stretch. It's actually 40% of returns. It does help to reduce volatility by about 90%. That's where the 90% misquote often comes in. Yeah. So with that, yeah, probably a mix of both for most people.
Thanks,
And
for your question. I hope I answered it.
all right, this will likely be our final question.
Great.
All right. Here, Justin is asking, how do you get your significant other or parents on board to invest if they don't really believe in investing? Oh,
Ooh, difficult question. I think it depends on if I may go first, I think it depends on what takes them. So, for example, I mean, sorry for drawing back to my own example again, like I am a very mathematical driven person because my background is in math. So, in order to persuade me, if you use statistics, you would persuade me. So, I think
Now I know. Okay.
so if you boil down to like what the person what takes the person, I think if you truly believe that it's something that will really benefit them, you can show them what takes them. But ultimately, I don't think you can expect them to follow what you believe is right, because everyone, like we mentioned, personal finance is personal. So if they really don't want to follow what you believe in, then it's very hard for you to convince them in any form of way, unless they're open to that. I think here in particular, I think let's say if parents, I think a common question or common one that people talk to me about is, how do I tell my parents not to put all their life savings in FD, and be a bit like take a bit more risk, or put even not more risk, right? Even things like money market funds, not that high risk, but then give you more returns than FD. Not financial advice, guys. But I think you probably have to show them some information that it's not just coming from you as a son or a daughter, because they would think that what would you know. If there's someone who believes in authority, believes in information, that can be something that you can show to them. If they are the kind of uncle and aunties who believe in viral information from their friends, then probably they have to find a
Uh,
friend who is influential enough, who does this, but then it can like backfire, because double-edged sword, right? The person can either be great or can lure you into things that is not great. So
Skim cepat kaya.
yeah, correct. So may not work like as what you want it to work, but I think ultimately it boils down to how you speak to the person in their own language. I think that's important.
Yeah, yeah, good thoughts, definitely. And really speaking about the language that the person is as well. And yeah, having proof, whether it's statistics that apparently works for Michelle, or for other people maybe different things as well. For some it may be trusting what they read in the papers, and there's actually a lot of major papers actually cover personal finance or investment related stuff as well. So that can be a source of reference or information as well, or sites as well. There are a number of great sites out there with information that can kind of be unbiased, telling about the pros and cons really. I think it also helps if you yourself are doing it, and you can be an example as well, Justin, to your significant other or your parents, for example, and to get them to start. Sometimes it's just about kind of like when you're a kid actually and you're going swimming for the very first time. You don't want to be throw them into the pool where they sink or swim. That's probably the fastest way, but probably they won't enjoy the experience, and whether can they absorb, are they okay with the heart attack of that happening just so rapidly. Yeah, so start with a small amount, get the feet wet, put in a couple of thousand or whatever the minimum is. Let them experience it. Can you sleep at night? Are they worried about it every day? Son, my investment went down. How? Yeah, that's going to be a pain in your life as well if you're going to
That's
be dealing with
true.
that on a daily basis. So yeah, get the feet wet, and once they actually get used to it, comfortable with it, then slowly increase the amount. If it doesn't happen immediately, it's okay as well. And if it doesn't happen ever, that's also technically okay as well, because each person has their own choices. What seems right for you may not be right for everyone else as well. And I've been quoting this quote recently because it was the last book that I finished reading. It was actually from Morgan Housel, which which Aaron, Mr. Stingy, he was very nice. He gave me a copy of the book actually, so that's how he got
Is
it.
it the psychology of money?
Yeah, the psychology of money. And one of the chapters, the heading basically was that that what we experience with money is like really like 0.00001% of what the world actually experiences, but that actually makes up 80% of what we believe money is like actually. So just recognizing that there is a different journey for
Absolutely.
everyone. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you for your question, Justin.
Thanks
Great
for the
question.
question, Justin. Yeah, totally. Yeah. You have any final quick thoughts before we move into the end bit here?
Oh no, but I just think that what like a fantastic chat we had today, and very great questions as well, covering a very broad spectrum of things that we may not have covered during the chat. Hopefully we covered enough, 80% of what people want to
I
know
hope so.
about personal finance. But if you have any other questions that we weren't able to cover, or if you're listening to this at a later date and it's not live anymore, I think you can always feel free to drop like any one of us a note. If you have one thing that you want us to clarify, we're happy to do that at any point of time.
Yep. Most definitely. All right. And with that, this is actually a plug segment. So yeah, Michelle, feel free to plug your Her Duit podcast and why everyone should listen to Her Duit.
Great. Hi, guys. Michelle again. If you're just tuning in at the tail end of this video, so I am the host and producer of this podcast called Her Duit. And it's a podcast while focused on women. Obviously, I have listeners from both men and women, but it covers money stories from women who are my interviewees and them sharing their learnings as well as their experience in all things, not just personal finance, but we will be branching into more career as well as business side of things as well. It's on all your major podcast platforms. So if you use Spotify, it's there. Apple Podcasts, it's there. Google Podcasts, Breaker, Stitcher, and more. If you don't use any podcasting apps, you can go to anchor.fm/herduit. That works as well. Hope to see you there. If you want to find me, you can't speak to me on the podcast. I have a Instagram and Facebook page at her.duit for Instagram, and on Facebook it's Her Duit. And you can speak to me there on private DM or comments on my posts.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Feel free to drop your links all in the chat actually,
I
and
will
we
do
will
that.
be also be sharing that as well. As well as we usually what we do is we get our team to come up with an edited version of it where we cut away all the awkward ums, ahs, and pauses, and so it's like a super short version. We try to keep it like 20-30 minutes top, so that's for
Perfect.
everyone. So yeah. I think it was a really great conversation with you, Michelle, here today. And yeah, thank you so much for being here and having this coffee chat conversation with all of us this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you for inviting me to speak today.
All right, Michelle. All right, just hang out in the backstage a little bit if you're not in a rush. And yeah, while we wrap up this episode here.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so it was really great. It was the first coffee chat session for the year. For those who are watching, you may realize that the video is a little bit high definition. I just got a very new webcam actually, but more importantly was today as we head into 2021, and with the year of the ox right around the corner as well. So today I really enjoyed this conversation with Michelle. The majority or just about all of it was really unscripted. Really, and I think that's how we'll be actually proceeding ahead with the various coffee chats as well. And really looking at it, I think that the question or talk about personal finance is not really so much of is there a gender divide really, but really just recognizing that as just because of how we are actually created and both nature, nurture, etc. We all have our own differences, and just to be aware of that as well, and to be inclusive actually in all our conversations, and more importantly to actually start having those conversations with your loved ones and those around you as well. So with that, that will be the end of today's coffee chat. Feel free to check out the notes as well. The show notes will be on mypf.my/digital. All previous episodes are there. We also have a YouTube as well as a podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Spotify. So yeah, go ahead and check us out as well. And yeah, check out the links from Michelle, which will be shared at the end in the show notes or in the comments as well. So everyone, have a great weekend there, and I'll see you soon in the very next coffee chat.